All right, welcome everyone. May the 4th be with you, and welcome to the Ultimate Star Wars discussion featuring 4 nerds that really like Star Wars. We're all different. We're of 2 different generations, but 2 of us are both within the same age range of each other. But it is a nice way to show that Star Wars truly has universal appeal. The fact that there are still little kids getting into Star Wars, and there are people. I mean, my mom saw Star Wars when it came out, and she's one of the most boring people on the planet. So Star Wars truly is for everyone. Actually, no, my mom is not boring. I love you, Mom, but she is a little bit of a square and definitely not into science fiction and fantasy. So this is going to be a bit more of a discussion thing. We're going to talk about each. So I am Liz. Todd, would you like to say hi?
Hello, and this here's Sam.
All right. Actually, I might have this up. Yep. Might be the best way to do it. Mark, would you like to say hi?
Hello.
All right. And Eric, aka Pedro Pascal, would you like to say hi or participate, or are you just gonna sit there in the helmet? All right, helmet it is.
This is the way.
Okay, here we go.
This is the way.
All right. I'm just going to. There we go. I need to find this out. So, what is Star Wars? Do we really need to ask what Star Wars is? It's one of the biggest properties on the planet at this point. But let's say, Eric, would you like to quickly summarize what Star Wars is?
Well, I suppose I have to take the helmet off after all that. What is Star Wars?
Yeah, just a quick
summarize Star Wars.
1 to 2 sentences of the plot of Star Wars.
It is a fairy tale set in space. It is a space opera. It is wizards. It is princesses. It is classic story tropes told in a science fiction world. Heroes and villains.
Yeah.
Light and dark.
Wookiees and Ewoks.
Wookiees and Ewoks.
And puppets.
Droids and non-droids.
Space pirates.
Space pirates.
I think
The best movie music ever.
Ooh. Actually, yeah. But the description of Star Wars as a fantasy film in a science fiction setting is fairly accurate. But it's interesting to put yourself in May of 1977. You've never heard of Star Wars except there's this movie out. So flash forward about almost 45 years at this point, and Star Wars is almost ubiquitous with science fiction. One of the biggest properties on the planet. Again, the fact that we have May the 4th be with you shows just how big this property is. So before we get started on the actual films, let's look at what gave us Star Wars. So the biggest influence is probably Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. There are a lot of parallels. There's some good side-by-sides here in terms of both visual cues that Lucas took from it, but also storytelling cues. So Todd, would you like to give a quick summary of the similarities between The Hidden Fortress and Star Wars?
Okay, but before I will point this out, I do want to say, and this will probably come up again later, he credited the Hidden Fortress far more for the Phantom Menace than they did the original Star Wars, but I will get back to that.
All righty.
But in this case, obviously, you've already pointed out the obvious parallels. R2-D2 and C-3PO are kind of Lucas's parallel to the 2 characters that first introduced to in the Hidden Fortress are basically these 2. They're not quite bandits. They're these 2 sad sack conscripts who they came out the losing side of a battle, who are basically thrown into this whole situation, just trying to get away from everything going on around them. You have a princess on the run from a defeated army. You've got the wise general. She turns to you for advice. It's not a 1-to-1, but if you watch the Hidden Fortress, you can see a lot of the obvious tells. And interesting fun fact for some people who may not already know this: one of Lucas's first casting choices he wanted but did not happen. He wanted Toshiro Mifune, who was basically he was Kurosawa's big star. He was his De Niro.
Mhm.
and he wanted him to play Obi-Wan.
So I know 2 months ago when I did my Setsuko Hara program, I was like, I'd love to go into an alternate universe where Setsuko Hara was the female lead in Rashomon. I would like to see an alternate universe where Toshiro Mifune is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, no disrespect to Alec Guinness, but Toshiro Mifune would have killed it. And I also would like to think Toshiro Mifune would not look down on Star Wars as much as Alec Guinness did.
As I
But
say, I think Guinness might be okay with the switch.
but then there's other stuff like Flash Gordon, John Ford movies. John Ford was a hugely influential director to a lot of like the film brat people. Steven Spielberg was also greatly influenced by John Ford. And Todd, as you pointed out, the film The Dam Busters, the raid on the Death Star is cribbed from that a lot.
Oh yeah, and that was from here's the next people talk about it. That was deliberate. Like he actually showed them, it's like we basically want to do this.
Yeah, and I'm gonna use this slide to have some kind of a gripe or like air a grievance. So, and again, I know that the internet, everything has to be either the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. We can't have any nuance, but boy, howdy, am I sick of people saying, oh, Star Wars ripped off the Hidden Fortress. This is a rule I have. If a filmmaker or any kind of creative actively cites an inspiration and is like, I'm paying an homage or this inspired me, it's not ripping it off. It's naming an inspiration. It art throughout.
It's what we were all taught in school. Cite your sources.
Yeah, that too. But I'm like, the whole history of art has been being inspired by other people and building upon that. So if you do hear someone say George Lucas ripped off the Hidden Fortress, just say that's not true. He's actively talked about how much that film inspired him. And in fact, that encouraged a lot of nerds like me to go watch the Hidden Fortress. So now on to what I'm going to gather most of the people here. This was their first introduction to Star Wars, which is the original trilogy. All right, I don't know why this isn't moving. 1 second. There we go. So some quick background. In the late 60s, the old Hollywood system collapsed, both metaphorically and in some cases literally. A lot of studios had lost a ton of money on these big budget projects, a lot of the big budget musicals like Paint Your Wagon and Dr. Dolittle. There were studios that were almost close to bankruptcy, and it was very clear that the old model and a lot of these old filmmakers just weren't doing it for audiences anymore. But what grew out of the late 60s and into the early 70s was new Hollywood cinema. You had films like Bonnie and Clyde. You had films like Easy Rider. You had filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, people who grew up watching films and now wanting to make their own. And, you know, independent filmmaking was getting a little bit easier. Also, quick props to Roger Corman for helping really train up a lot of these directors or giving them work. Jonathan Demme famously got his start with Corman. So by 1977, we've had, Spielberg changed the game with Jaws. Jaws is the first real, not the first real blockbuster, but the first real summer blockbuster as we know it now. So we now, in 1977, a filmmaker named George Lucas, who had had some films before, he had an idea for, a space opera. So this movie comes out in 1977. Fox, this might be weird to think about it now, Fox was not sure if Star Wars would be a hit. They were like, it's a space movie. Space movies don't always do well. We don't have any big stars in this. Alec Guinness was the biggest star at the time. So as you can see here, its official release date, it was released in less than 50 theaters around the country, which for a Star Wars movie is unheard of now. It grew via word of mouth, and by the end of 1977, it was the biggest film of the year and one of the highest grossing films of all time, and it eventually surpassed Jaws. So in its initial run, it made $300 million, and that's almost $1 billion today, which kind of shows you Star Wars has been a $1 billion franchise since the beginning. And this was back in the day where movies didn't just stay in theaters in a month and go straight to streaming. It was in theaters for over a year because, keep in mind, it was practically the only way you could see certain movies, and it would be re-released over again. And it was, and still technically is, merger be damned, one of 20th Century Fox's biggest hits, clearly before the Disney acquisition. So I'm going to go with Mark and Eric. When did you first see Star Wars?
Well, I was born in 1978, and I remember seeing Empire and Jedi at the theater. So I would have seen Star Wars on a bootlegged beta tape that my brother had
Wow.
back in California when it was more accessible in that area, because I'm from California.
Mhm.
And we wore that tape out. I don't know if I think I saw Star Wars at the theater when it was re-released, because they did re-release it with the episode
Mhm.
4 edition couple of years later.
Yeah.
But I don't really have the memory of that. I have the memory of Empire and Jedi.
Eric.
My first exposure to Star Wars was actually on a record, which I used to listen to as a boy, called The Story of Star Wars.
Aw.
And one of those records is sitting behind the circulation desk at the Derry Public Library right now on display.
Oh,
Nice.
hey.
Come see our stuff.
And that would have been somewhere around 1982, probably, because I remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the theater on my birthday in 1983. I was 4 years old. I turned 4 on that day. So I remember listening to the record, and I remember seeing Star Wars in pieces that would have been broadcast on one of the big three, NBC, ABC, or CBS, at some point. And I also remember seeing The Empire Strikes Back right before going in to see Return of the Jedi. So that would have been in 1983, would have been the first time I saw it.
Right. I actually saw Return of the Jedi first on television in late 94, early 95. And then, of course, fell in love with it. My parents went to the local video rental place on base and checked out A New Hope for me. And the Christmas of 1995, I received the 1995 issue Star Wars VHS set, the one that had the Vader, Stormtrooper, and Yoda.
The last time they'd be available. That's it.
I still have those
Asterisk.
VHS tapes. Todd, what about you?
So, like you, I was definitely not around for when these first came out. I don't think I would even qualify for the proverbial twinkle in my father's eye when Luke took the torch to his dad. I think my first was
Nice.
seeing it on television. Seeing the first one on television, it would probably be ballpark. It would be either late 80s or early 90s. My memories of it were really jumbled for a little while there. Because you see, as a real little kid, yeah, you remember certain scenes, you don't remember the full through line until you watched it again later. And at the time, I had no idea there were sequels. I kind of went the roundabout way where I found a book version of Return of the Jedi at the school library. It's like, okay, it was pretty cool. It's a cool follow-up. Then I realized, wait, this was a movie. There's more of these.
This was me. That was me when I found out when I watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I'm like, wait, there's others? And yeah, as I joked earlier, even my mother, who is definitely not a science fiction person and kind of a square, it was a milestone that she went to 4 movies in a theater last year. But even she, as she put it, she goes, "Oh, honey, everyone saw Star Wars. Even I saw Star Wars in a theater. You had to. It was just the movie everyone wanted to see." So this comes out and it completely changes the game. It changes the game in terms of what can be successful, and it shows, similar to Jaws, it's like, hey, let these directors, these young and hungry directors, maybe give them the budget and give them the reins to kind of create this stuff. Although, Todd, you'll get to it a little later, the myth of George Lucas, the mastermind, is just that, a myth. But let's move on to, I would say, is still the best oh, wait, no. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes!
everybody.
Happy
I
Life
really-
Day.
Stick a pin in this because this will be coming to one of my theses later.
All righty. Yeah, you know, I forgot. Actually, no, I'm kidding. I didn't forget. I knew the slide was coming. Yeah, so in between what is the best Star Wars movie ever and you know, A New Hope, which is definitely up there, we have one of the worst things to ever happen to Star Wars, which is the holiday special, which was known for years as the Star Wars Christmas special. It is not Christmas special. Christmas does not exist in Star Wars world. It is a Wookiee holiday called Life Day. I saw this on a bootleg in the late when I was in college. It's bad. It was bad then and it's bad now. No amount of nostalgia can save this. I'm sorry, everybody.
There's a lot to enjoy though.
There are pieces that are good. B. Arthur is trying her darndest.
She is easily the best part of that thing.
Yes.
The animation segment is kind of cool, but oh, it's 2 hours long. It's a slog, and the Wookiee designs are awful. That little kid Wookiee is terrifying. And I mean, I don't want to speak ill of our dearly departed Princess Carrie Fisher, but you can tell she is blitzed at the end of that special.
I mean, to be fair, all three of them are kind of checked out. Like, bless him, Mark Hamill is trying, but Harrison Ford is like 1 foot out the door the whole time.
Harrison Ford has been 1 foot out the door of this.
It's true. Since the first second, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to like a movie. It's okay to like the holiday special, but this is one where it's been interesting to watch the public opinion turn on it, because for years it was a mistake. Again, it was broadcast once and never again because the reception was so bad. And
Disney is now
is-
selling merchandise.
I know.
They're selling the Life Day globes now.
This used to be like,
Yeah.
anytime you saw a list of what were considered like some of the absolute nadirs of television history, the worst of the worst, this would almost always make it on there somewhere without fail.
Yeah.
Like, this is up with a Heidi Bowl.
But yeah, I mean, it is a seeing is believing though, because if I were to tell you B. Arthur and Harvey Korman were in Star Wars, you might not believe me.
It's a wonderful train wreck.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to. It's an interesting train wreck.
I will give the one other thing I will give it. Art Carney can now say it's been in both one of the best and one of the worst Christmas specials ever.
All right, so now we get to what I was teasing, which is I still think after 11 films, the best Star Wars movie, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. And again, try to put yourself in the seat in May of 1980 and finding out that Darth Vader did not kill Luke's father. Darth Vader is Luke's father. And I asked my mom, because I think she did see this in theaters. I'm like, well, what was the reaction in the theater? And she goes, I think people were screaming at that point. Just like a collective, what? And that for me is, you know, this was before the internet. So the only way you could find out is if, I don't know, Homer Simpson, you know, was talking about it as he passed
Right.
you in line. But no, unless someone really let loose with the spoilers. But just this idea of a franchise taking this many turns and pulling the rug out from under you with only the second film. This film ends with the Resistance in disarray. This ends with Luke having an earth-shattering revelation. Han is frozen in carbonite and we don't know his fate. It's a dire ending at the end of that. But luckily, unlike in 1977, where we're just like, well, that was a fun little movie. At least now moviegoers knew, okay, set the clocks 3 years. We'll be back and see how this all unfolds. And I unfortunately had this spoiled for me because, as I mentioned earlier, I saw Return of the Jedi first on TV. So I was like, I just went in knowing, yep, I know what all this is. But it's a great movie. It still holds up. I think the way it balances the drama with humor is great. There's a lot of good dramatic tension. Billy D. Williams doing not one but two little heel turns is fantastic. One of the greatest declarations of love of all time. And even that worm on that moon that the Millennium Falcon lands on is charming in its own way. Does anyone disagree that this is the best Star Wars film?
So I feel like there's two ways to look at the first Star Wars movie.
Mhm.
By itself, as its point in history and how important it is in film history, and as part of the franchise. As part of the franchise, the first film, very little actually happens. Like our memories of what's great about Star Wars mainly actually comes from Empire Strikes Back because the mythology is expanded. Yoda, the Force, the
Mhm.
father twist. I think this is not just the best Star Wars movie. This is my pick for the best movie ever made.
Dang,
Yes.
Ambitious.
the Seven Samurai.
Now I'm a child of the 80s, and as a child of the 80s, Star Wars is my top. So the top of the top is the top.
Alrighty.
Sure.
Also, the most quotable of the Star Wars movies, I think.
It's the best written.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Whoever Leigh Brackett was, God bless her. I don't have any idea, but this is the only one she helped write, and you got to give a lot of the dialogue to her based on the other two.
You do, and props to Harrison Ford, that famous story of George Lucas said, "You're going to say this," and Harrison Ford. I love that Harrison Ford has been a curmudgeonly old man for his entire life, essentially. But just
So-
says, "Yeah, I'm not saying that."
I will throw the fun fact out there since we discussed like the earth-shattering revelation about Darth Vader. If you ever look up the earlier Lee Brackett drafts, it is interesting because yeah, there was a time where Lucas almost made the spectacularly poor decision of going, let's kill Vader off in this. He's a throwaway villain.
Oh, we'll get there,
Bullet
Todd.
dodged.
We'll get to that. And moving on to my introduction to Star Wars, which was The Return of the Jedi on television. I actually think I had seen it a little bit younger, maybe in the early 90s, because when I was watching this at like 8 or 9, I was like, especially some of the parts in Jabba's palace, I'm like, this feels somewhat familiar. And I think my parents were like, oh yeah, no, I think one time when we were at your uncle's house, Return of the Jedi must have been on. But, you know, I didn't retain that at age 3 or 4. So this movie comes out, and this is going to be a running theme. Fairly divisive when it comes out, and also opens at 1,000 screens as opposed to 50. How much has changed in 6 years? But it comes out, and there's a lot of divisiveness about it. It's like Vader's character's completely changed. The revelation about Leia being Luke's sister is seen as lazy. There were a lot of people that had problems with the Ewoks, which fight me, the Ewoks rule. But as we see now, The Return of the Jedi is held up there with the original Star Wars and with The Empire Strikes Back, almost on the similar level of quality. Versus when it came out, it wasn't Phantom Menace or The Last Jedi bad, but it definitely was seen as, oh, it's the weakest of the 3 by a country mile. Versus now it's it's weak, it's not the best, but it's still a lot of fun, which Todd, you will talk about a little later in terms of time healing all wounds. So I'm just going to say, as I said earlier, I like the Ewoks. I get that they're a little cartoony, but the Ewoks as allies are kind of cool because number one, it's guerrilla warfare type of fighters versus a more stable or established army. And number two, we see multiple instances of the Ewoks being downright brutal. There's one where they pull, what is it, the ATSTs?
Yeah.
Yeah, ATSTs. They pull a scout trooper out of there and just start pounding him with rocks and sticks. The Ewoks would have, look, if had C-3PO not intervened, Han Solo would have met a very different fate.
There's a non-0% chance at least one Rebel ate human flesh by the end of that movie.
Yeah, really. Like the Ewoks, yes, they're cute and cuddly, but they will also mess you up if they get on their bad side. And that is why I defend the Ewoks. Now, those other Ewok movies, no, I will not defend those. So,
So again, fun fact, Wilford Brimley in a Star Wars movie.
How do we all feel about the Ewoks, everybody?
So I feel like this is an example. After this, we're going to get into a lot of movies that all of us are going to nitpick and complain about.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that has to do with our age.
Mhm.
I saw Return of the Jedi on opening night when I was 5, twice in a row. My parents bought tickets for the 8 o'clock and the 11 o'clock show.
You had cool parents.
Dang.
That memory is amazing. I love Return of the Jedi. My
Mhm.
brother, who's 13 years older than me, hated the Ewoks and hated the second Death Star. He likes the stuff with Luke and Vader. He likes the stuff with Jabba. But to
Oh, yeah.
him, it's nowhere near as good as the original two because he wasn't 5 years old. He was 18 when it came out. And it was too kiddie for him. We'll get into this with some other movies that are coming up, which when they first came out were a little too kiddie for me. But for that generation, they always defend those movies. So I think a lot of your enjoyment of initial viewing on certain Star Wars movies depends on how old you are when you watch them.
I think you are correct on that. So afterwards, Star Wars is over, and it's like, will there be more? We don't know, but luckily other mediums picked up the slack. There were a ton of books. There were 2 made-for-TV Ewoks movies, Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor. Battle for Endor, I think
It's terrible.
It's terrible, but I think I may have seen that even before I saw Return of the Jedi at night.
Oh,
I had
I'm so
no-
sorry.
Oof.
I just thought it was a fantasy movie.
Caravan of Courage is actually watchable, and then the first 5 minutes of Battle for Endor, they kill the entire family but the little girl. It's
Yeah, no, I
unforgivable.
remember watching that and being kind of being like, what the heck am I watching? But okay, let's go
Oh.
with it. They had the expanded universe books, which Todd, you are wearing. Is it an Heir to the Empire t-shirt right now?
Excellent series.
Indeed.
Timothy Zahn, who we lost a few years ago, I haven't read a lot of the extended universe, but I read his books, and love or hate the extended universe as a whole, Timothy Zahn was definitely the best author they had.
They came out at the perfect time too.
Yeah.
It was one where at that point it was still a lot of the map hadn't been filled in yet, so he had a little bit more of a free hand with it.
Yeah.
We had multiple re-releases. I remember by the time the 1997 ones came out, I went to go see it at the local theater in South Hadley, and that is a theater that's at the top of a tower. It's called the Tower Theaters. There's a circular staircase going up. That line went all the way down to the ground. It was about 4 stories of people waiting to get in to see the re-releases of Star Wars. And of course, there were toys, which I totally had toys. I had, my brother and I shared them, but we definitely had the big Millennium Falcon toy, which I loved. Probably played with to the point where it broke. I had a stuffed Ewok. I had a Darth Vader helmet. It's also funny because when The Force Awakens was announced and Rey was announced as the lead, I saw a lot of this like, oh, what, Star Wars is for girls now? What the heck is this? And I'm like, Star Wars I always just figured was for everybody. Like when I was
Leia kicks butt in Jedi.
well, that too.
And I mean, this
like,
for people who are old enough to go like, they marketed prequel stuff to girls. Who's kidding who here?
Yeah, no, it's but in the 90s, we start to hear, or the trades start to hear. I didn't hear because I was a kid, and I was a few years off from reading Entertainment Weekly. But the prequels were announced. Filming begins in 97, and in 1998, the first teaser debuts. And then we get one of the biggest disappointments of my life. And yeah, The Phantom Menace. I did want to point out, like, throughout some great poster work for the prequels. I'll give it that. And that first teaser poster for episode 1 is a fantastic poster. But I don't think, I was 13 at the time this came out. I don't know if I have ever seen so much hype for a movie. And then a lot of kind of bit of a letdown afterwards. I saw it opening day. I was super excited. I actually borrowed my mother's lipstick so I could try to do the lipstick that Queen Amidala had. I was already just really into all of this. And I definitely had a feeling of, okay, this certainly isn't hitting all the magic it did, but I think I'm going to echo one of my favorite podcasts is We Hate Movies, and they did discuss The Phantom Menace at one point in their run. And one of the hosts, Steven Sadak, regarding this, he goes, I think I convinced myself I liked this movie for about 5 years. And yeah, I convinced myself I liked this for about a year before I'm like, no, I didn't like it. But it did introduce me to Ewan McGregor, who I still have a crush on, and it has some great set pieces in it. Duel of the Fates is great. The music is fantastic. It's just, oh, it's not a good movie. I get it if you saw it when you were 5 years old. But here's the thing. Jedi's definitely a flawed movie. This whole trilogy shows that George Lucas needs collaboration. And I think that The Phantom Menace is the biggest example of George Lucas needed somebody else there to not even tell him no, but tell him maybe you should try something else.
I will take a moment to give the devil his due on this one. He did try to get other people to direct this one, and unfortunately, a lot of his friends were a little bit like, "No, George, you should do this one. This is your baby. You should direct it."
But we'll explain. We'll get to that later. I know you have something you'd want to say about the George Lucas myth, but a sadder thing, which will unfortunately become a running trend in Star Wars, was, yeah, there was fan disappointment, but I did not know until years later that older fans took it to an extreme degree. Jake Lloyd, who played young Anakin, and I'm going to say this, I don't think Jake Lloyd is very good or was very good in this movie. He pretty much quit acting due to the backlash he received, which this is a 10-year-old child. If a 10-year-old child does not perform well in a movie, it is not his fault. That is on the director. And Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar Binks, again, a character who is mired in controversy for a number of reasons, he actually, in the midst of the backlash to this film, considered taking his own life because of the fan hate he was getting. And I have not watched pretty much any of the Star Wars shows, but seeing that Ahmed Best was able to come back and play a Jedi, I'm like, well, it's nice
In a heroic, very heroic role. It was very positive.
Yeah. It's nice that Disney reached out to him to try to amend that, and that the fans welcomed him back, because I think when a lot of fans saw that, they looked at it and they're like, oh God.
It wasn't his fault. I don't even
Yeah.
understand
Yeah, no.
people getting on his fault. I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
There's a couple of great things at Phantom Menace. The Emperor and the handling of the Emperor is like Kaiser Soze and The Usual Suspects.
Mhm.
It's the only piece of direction of this movie that Lucas does well, is if you don't know who the bad guy is, you'd never guess it, but there's clues with music cues with the way it's directed. And if you're going to watch it 1 through 6, which I wouldn't recommend, that part of it is kind of brilliant. The music's great. Ewan's casting is great. The problem with the movie, there's 2 for me. 1, it shouldn't exist. Attack of the Clones should have been episode 1, and the Clone Wars should have been episode 2. That's the first problem. We didn't need 10 years before. And the second issue, more than any of the story points, this movie is terribly directed.
Yeah.
I mean, Ewan McGregor films reshoots after he's gained about 20 pounds, and you can tell which scenes are which. I mean, that's, for a movie of this magnitude with this money, it's just kind of unforgivable. There's shots where people are talking and the camera moves for no reason and then moves back, and they kept that shot. It's almost Ed Wood-esque. So that's my biggest issue with Phantom Menace.
Yeah. Yeah, also, just, I'm going to give I think Natalie Portman is a fantastic actress. I think she does very well here. Not so much in the other 2 films, but again, I don't think that's on Portman. And also, I think Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn is fairly well cast. Although he said, he's like, I'm not coming back. I'm done. I mean, why would he? He's got Taken money now.
Oh, but he did.
Oh, wait, he did? I thought he said.
Oh, he did. Spoiler alert, but he did.
Oh, is it? Okay, was it for one of those Clone Wars things? Because I never watched those.
Nope. Well, he did for that too, but he's been back for the live action as well.
Okay, this might be one I missed. Well, wait, is it just his voice?
Nope. He came back as a surprise. It was pivotal and necessary, but it is supposed to be a surprise.
Okay, now I'm gonna wonder what the heck I missed, because I thought I read an interview where he's just like, no, I'm not coming back. But
that was a long time before. He came back for Dave Filoni's cartoons, and then he came back live action as well.
Okay. So now we go on to Attack of the Clones, and for me, it's this and Phantom Menace are neck and neck for what is the worst Star Wars movie of all time. The Phantom Menace is slightly edged out for me a little bit more because, again, as your point, it doesn't even really need to exist. But yeah, so what is supposed to be developing in the Phantom Menace is Anakin's turn to the dark side, along with his developing relationship with Padme. Neither of which Hayden Christensen sells very well. And Hayden Christensen is not a bad actor. He has been in other films where he is, I think at the very least, decent. But it doesn't show here. I think throughout all of these movies, the only good actor is Ewan McGregor. I don't know how he manages to break through, but again, this is all on George Lucas because you have very good actors like Natalie Portman, Christopher Lee, although Christopher Lee just does what he wants. So
I mean,
fine.
right along the same lines as this, you got Christopher Lee starring in 2 big trilogies. You watch him in either, you can see which one his investment is in.
But you have introduced in this is Mace Windu, played by a man who is a walking charisma personality fountain, Samuel L. Jackson. When Samuel L. Jackson seems kind of flat, again, you've got to lay that at the feet of the director. And you can see in the gross of Attack of the Clones that there was a lot of people like lost enthusiasm with the Phantom Menace, but there was this idea of like, okay, well, Jake Lloyd's gone, maybe it's all going to be okay. And then we come to the theater again and we're like, no, it's not okay. Dang it, it's still not good. Yeah,
Can I throw up a defense?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so there is a small internet movement. No, it's not strong enough, but they made a cut of this movie for IMAX theaters. And back then, it was true. True IMAX theaters can only have 120 minutes of footage. So 14 minutes had to be cut out. Not only did they cut out unnecessary set pieces, but whoever the editor was edited slight moments in the love story and got rid of all of the uncomfortableness and just made it 2 stupid teenagers. It is by far the best cut of this movie, and why they haven't released that on any of the versions, I don't know. It's a very watchable just by cutting out slight reactions, touching her shoulder, talking about sand, just little moments, taking them out, and it's just a couple of teenagers that are going to ruin the galaxy. It's actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I'd be interested in seeing that, and that is a testament to what good editing can do. For editing can save a movie. I mean, as we now know with the original Star Wars film, Martha Lucas saved that movie via editing. But yeah.
Verna Fields with Jaws.
Yeah, but yeah, there was definitely, Phantom Menace, not great. There was a little, I think the general feel, at least in my circle, was Attack of the Clones. Okay, it's a little bit better. At least we got to see Yoda in action, but still not great. And why did we need to see baby Boba Fett? That's kind of weird.
See, so that's actually, this is probably a good time to bring this up. And it's something that the other 2 movies are guilty of. I think one of the biggest problems I have with the prequels, the older I get, is I know people argue they expand the universe. I don't think they do. I think they shrink it.
Yeah, that's been an argument.
They do.
There's a whole Patton Oswalt stand-up routine.
Oh, yeah. It's like I've seen people try to argue like, no, the prequels expanded. It's the sequels that shrink. It's like, no, they both shrink in different ways.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we cannot quote that Patton Oswalt bit because it gets
brilliant.
Really seen. But
YouTube,
just look it up.
At midnight, I will kill George Lucas with a shovel.
Yes, that is the title of that track. I believe it was it off of My Weakness is Strong or one of his earlier ones?
It was either My Weakness is Strong or Werewolves and Lollipops. It was one.
I think it was Werewolves and Lollipops.
I do too. I think it's that one.
Yeah. So then we get to the end of the prequels, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and I mean, by default, this is the best one.
Its problems are the first 2. Honestly, there's nothing in this movie I have a problem with, unless it's they had to do this because they did it in the first 2.
Yeah. I don't know. Padme dying of a broken heart is pretty.
Oh no, he choked her. He choked her.
I know, but they literally said she died of a broken heart.
It is a clunky bit of writing.
It's a fantasy. It's fine.
The Jedi Purge is one of those where it's like it needed more time, but again, that falls on the fact that the first 2 movies wasted a lot of time they could have used.
Yes.
breathe this out.
I mean, Hayden Christensen is a little bit better in this than he is in Attack of the Clones. But for me, if I'm going to say something nice about the prequels now, it's a monumentous occasion. The moment where we first see Vader in the helmet and we hear that first breath, I actually thought, dang, like my hair stood up. I think it's a
I also
great
think in
moment.
terms of good acting, we left out Ian McDermott. He does a
Oh,
great
yeah.
job in this movie
Yeah,
as the
you're
Emperor.
right. Ian McDermott and Ewan McGregor are the only two really making an effort.
Liz,
also,
are we going to be getting into the outside of the movies later on, or are we not going to talk about that?
we're gonna get to that. I feel like that's best for the end.
Okay, because I do want to make a point that I feel the same way you do about the prequels, and now I love them and I can watch them freely because I've joined the church of Dave Filoni. So
Well,
we'll get back to that.
We will be getting to that.
Okay.
So in the interim,
Here we go.
all
yeah.
right. So we have there was the Clone Wars series. It started off as an animated movie, which actually wasn't that well received, but the TV show was, and again, kind of sort of helped start the rehab campaign of the prequels. But the bigger story, and the one that affects Star Wars to this day now, is 2012, Disney acquires Lucasfilm. So now a lot of Star Wars fans hate Disney, and I have my own issues with Disney. But at the time, this was greeted with a lot of enthusiasm because post prequels, people were like, "Oh, good! If George Lucas has nothing to do with it, finally the new movies will be good." Which, be careful what you wish for, everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
That monkey paw's got a lot of fingers on it.
Yeah.
I think there are some good things and there are some bad things about the sequel trilogy. But 2013, it's announced a new trilogy is coming, and J.J. Abrams is announced as the director of the first installment, which I am going to put this out there. I hated Lost. I still hate Lost for wasting my god dang time. So when he was announced, I was like, ugh, let's see how good this will be. All right. So 2015, fast forward, we get The Force Awakens, and overall, so I was excited for this, and I was kind of monitoring on social media, like what people were saying for the advanced screenings. And to bring up Patton Oswalt again, he was like, you guys, JJ did it. So I was really excited to see this film because, as one of my friends pointed out, this is the closest we will get to seeing what it was like to see A New Hope. So let me explain. For the prequels, we already kind of knew what was going to happen. We're like, well, these are the prequels. We know where the story will end up. This was the first time we were going to be seeing a Star Wars film where we did not know where it was going to end up. So it was this idea of like, we're going into something almost entirely new. And I'm going to say this, I really like The Force Awakens, and I will get to this. I will explain a little more in depth later. I believe of the sequels, it is the best movie. It's mainly because it's the most consistent, and made $2 billion worldwide, and everyone just kind of breathed a sigh of relief that it was good. And we're like, okay, yeah, it's a little similar to New Hope. It's hitting some fan service beats, but you know what? It's good. It's enjoyable. Star Wars is back, everybody.
May I offer an opposing viewpoint?
All right.
This is my least favorite of the 11 movies. And the reason I will go to my grave with this statement
All right.
is that someone in a room was told that they had Mark Hamill, they had Harrison Ford, and they had Carrie Fisher, and they could make a sequel to Return of the Jedi. And what they chose to do was to make sure that none of them were on screen together at the same time, and to write a screenplay where in the sequels they never could either. I can't wait for Lethal Weapon 5 where Mel Gibson and Danny Glover are never on screen together.
But
it is asinine. It is the worst choice in film history. Midi-chlorians are better than that choice. This movie would have been better without the original cast. The new characters are fun, but I can't get past the fact that you're just waiting for something that'll never happen.
Okay. I mean, I disagree. I kind of liked the idea of like, okay, hey, we see Chewie, we see Han, we see Leia, we see a little bit of Luke, but it's the idea of we're mostly living with these new characters. You know, I actually think John Boyega's character of Finn is one of the had such potential to be a good storyline. The idea of what are the new stormtroopers? They're child soldiers that were kidnapped from their parents. And he's a stormtrooper who decides to go rogue. And it is a potential that is never fulfilled in the other two movies. And John Boyega has been very open about how let down he was, but we'll get to that once we get to The Last Jedi at the very least. So
I will offer one passing defense as far as the similarity aspects.
okay.
Remember, this was coming, as we pointed out, this was coming in off a movie-going audience that was still pretty burned by the prequels. So they were playing it safe to kind of show like, look, we know what you want, we know what you're expecting. Look, we're going to try and get this as close to the original flavor as possible for first time outs.
Yeah.
For better or worse, they succeeded there.
Yeah. So used to be Star Wars back in my day, Star Wars was every 3 years and then it went away for a while. But with the Disney acquisition, no, content. It was now once a year we had a new Star Wars movie. So 2016, we have Rogue One, which is a prequel film about the plan to steal the Death Star. And you know what? It's 1/3 of a good movie. The final final act is great, but it's poor. The editing on this is weird, and I'm not blaming the director as much because I think it got taken away from him. But Felicity Jones Daisy Ridley, an incredibly charismatic actress. I think a very good actress from other movies I've seen her in. But Felicity Jones, maybe she's great in other things, but she is a charisma black hole. I do not think I don't think she's convincing or even someone I want to follow. Had this movie just starred Diego Luna, it would have been a lot better. If he had been the main character and if they had swapped places, he's the main character, she's a side character, it would have been a lot better. I don't think we needed the whole thing with her chasing down her daddy, Mads Mikkelsen.
To your points about the editing, those trailers definitely suggest they did more with that character that then just kind of got hacked out of the movie.
It is, but I do wonder if that is because they looked and they're like, oh, this girl is just not connecting. I don't think she does, but a lot of the side characters are cool. I think Donnie Yen as kind of a almost Zatoichi type is really neat. Riza Mid has some good moments. Again, the whole final act of this film is great, but getting there is hard.
I love this movie. I actually put this on the same level as the original three. I think this is the best movie of the 5 that Disney's made.
All right. I mean, it's not my pick for the worst one. It's one where I'm like, I feel like the third act buys it a lot of goodwill. It's a lopsided movie, in my opinion.
I just like that they had I think people take for granted that ending because going into it, everyone was like, will Disney allow that ending? You know what I mean? I mean, I think we take for granted that Disney allowed that ending.
Oh yeah, the final third act of that movie is fantastic. I feel like getting there's a lot of fat to it, but
waste of a perfectly good Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, the sadder aspect of this movie is that 11 days after this movie premiered, Carrie Fisher passes away at the age of 60, and that throws through the whole Star Wars universe into not only mourning because we've lost an icon, but turmoil because clearly Carrie Fisher is supposed to be a part of this franchise. So there is the question of now what are we going to do? And I think that The Last Jedi is truly her final performance. I don't count The Rise of Skywalker. That was really they did what they had to do. But yeah, The Last Jedi, Carrie Fisher is the first one credited, and probably the most divisive film since The Return of the Jedi, because I think Phantom Menace is kind of just universally looked at as like, it's not that good. The Last Jedi has become almost a culture war thing now, which again, I'm like, whatever happened to just not liking a movie, everybody?
People love or hate this movie, and I
It is,
honestly don't understand either opinion.
that's where I am.
Because I think I'm a freak in this one because I look like it's mostly just meh, but it's got some of the highest highs of the sequel trilogy.
Oh yeah, there are some great moments in this movie. The battle in the throne room is amazing and well choreographed. I think the Rey and Luke story, the A plot of this film, is fantastic. The problem is Rian Johnson did not care about any of the other characters in this movie, and it shows.
Yeah.
And I think he completely resets Finn's character in a way that's almost insulting to any character development that Finn had.
There's also a 20-minute subplot that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be there. It's just about saving the animals, and it's just it's a great you know what? Good, save the animals. At least further the plot with it, please.
Yeah, there's some good moments in here, but I think again it's a very uneven film, and I think I get that Rian Johnson wanted to subvert expectations with Star Wars, but at the end of the day, I'm like, my dude, it's Star Wars. This is just a movie for kids.
Yeah.
You don't need to do some big grand subversion thing. And also the subversions he does, I don't think they're done particularly well. I feel like it's the cinematic equivalent of someone elbowing you in the ribs going, get it? Get it? And
you know what I think the best thing about this movie is that it led to Scream 5, which I thought was very clever. The plot of Scream 5 exists because of the reaction to The Last Jedi.
Oh wow, I have not seen Scream 5, but now I might.
Oh, you got to. It's better than you'd expect, and
okay.
Right. Why the killers are doing what they're doing is very connected to the reaction to Last Jedi.
Yeah, it's a movie where it's like I think there are some great moments in it, but man, it's real. It's just one where it's like it's a B- if I had to rate it. And what's sad is because of all the internet discourse, whenever you say I really don't like The Last Jedi, you have to go, oh no, but I hate it for like legitimate reasons. I don't have a problem with Laura Dern's character. I think she's fine. I just think this movie's very poorly paced. But as I said earlier, fan harassment of stars becomes a trend. Kelly Marie Tran basically was chased off social media because
it's not fans.
Well,
I'm sorry.
A contingent of fans.
It's like when a sports team wins and the people in the city use it as an excuse to tear things down. It's not sports fans doing it. Yeah. It's college kids that don't care about the sports team.
There are definitely some who are in this because they recognize they can make a buck off of outrage.
Oh yeah, no, and again, it became almost a culture war to Flashpoint, which is again, just it's ridiculous and sad because as we've seen earlier, there are real world consequences to this. And I don't think any actor who's in a movie, no matter how bad the movie is, should feel like their safety is being threatened. But yeah, this is, I mean, if I were to give another good plus to this movie, I think Carrie Fisher is great in it. I think that one little moment she has with Oscar Isaac, where she just kind of does that head, she kind of jerks her head like come here, sit down by me. It's such a great
Carrie Fisher moment.
It is. Yeah. It's such a Carrie Fisher moment. And she just, she had her staple like sass and attitude right up until the end. And it's, I gotta say in the theater when that dedication to her came up, I teared up a bit. So, and it was a nice send-off. I wish this was her send-off and they had just written it as Leia passed away between the films, because I'm not a fan of what they do with her in The Rise of Skywalker. But let's get to the origin story no one asked for. So Solo, which is probably more interesting for the behind the scenes drama than it is the actual film, comes out in 2018. In the summer, which is the first time since 2015 that Star Wars has been released in the summer again. And it's basically, how did Han Solo become Han Solo? And the reaction to the film was like, it's not bad for an adventure story, but why do we need to know about Han Solo's origin? So yeah, it was kind of just greeted with a meh. I think most people were more like, man, Donald Glover, if they ever want to do a Lando series, get Donald Glover back because he's fantastic.
Which we're still hoping will happen. Yeah.
That's the thing is like, everything else about that movie is interesting. Donald Glover's good. Woody Harrelson's good. Paul Bettany's villain is actually kind of a cool character. It's
Yeah.
just
The first time that they acknowledged the cartoons as being a part of the story with the surprise at the end.
Yeah. I did like Alden Ehrenreich. I hope I'm saying his name right.
Oh, he's a great actor.
yeah.
He is, and he
Hail Caesar is incredible in Hail
he's,
Caesar.
he's actually really good in Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, he is. That's right.
I mean, as much as I don't think this movie needed to exist, he does as an actor, he does kind of get the sort of blustery puff your chest out thing that Han Solo does do, where he kind of needs to put on a front for people. It's kind of, he does kind of get the whole, like, before Han Solo became a bit more comfortable being a scoundrel. I think he does a good job kind of creating a young Han Solo, but ultimately it's like, it's a movie that doesn't need to exist. But the more interesting part of it was Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who were behind the Lego movie, were originally writing and directing this film, and they were asked to leave. And we never quite knew what they were working on. The story that Kathleen Kennedy gave was they were not on time. And then there were some words of this is not in line with the vision.
I had heard that their version of Han was the Han we already had in Empire and Jedi, as opposed to a Han who hadn't gone through Star Wars yet.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what it is because I like Lord and Miller's work, but they gave it to Ron Howard. Ron Howard, serviceable enough director, but yeah, this was the first and I think so far only Star Wars movie to bomb at the box office. But
if we're being completely fair to it, it was also the fact they wedged it between Deadpool 2 and Infinity War. They were trying to bury this movie.
Yeah, and again, it was, I think that Disney saw a lot of the pre-release chatter was number one about the controversy of the making of it, but also there was this prevailing, like, why does this movie need to exist? I don't want this.
My family are Star Wars fans. I'm a Star Wars fan. I have to see every Star Wars movie the moment it came out. I saw this about 3 weeks after it came out. It was just like, oh yeah, I'll see it. I mean, I don't really care, but I'll see it.
Yeah. Also, man, you have a great actress and a good character with Thandiwe Newton. You just do nothing with it. Thanks, movie.
That's the other weird thing is it feels like the movie feels like it's a whole bunch of weird vignettes. Like if you were to tell me this was a single season TV series that they cut up into a compilation,
that would have made more sense almost.
I believe it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to what is, as of right now, the final Star Wars film. Probably not, everybody. It's coming back. The Rise of the Skywalker. And Todd, you said that this movie, speaking of Patton Oswalt, he's been coming up a lot tonight. You say that this movie reminds you of a Patton Oswalt skit.
So, in the most all audiences friendly way I can put this, there is a story on one of Patton Oswalt's earlier stand-up albums where he talks about how when he was first starting out, one of the things that we would often do is he would be warm-up acts for basically magic acts, stage magicians. And the idea that, like, yeah, no, this was the thing. Is like, if you want to be an upcoming stand-up, you warmed up for one of these guys. And he talks about one incident he heard is at where the guy he was opening up for he felt like he was getting shafted because he was being paid $5 less than he was agreed on. And he just gets he's like, this guy is doing that kind of anger where you're talking that very low, tense voice. And it's all over $5. And then he describes the guy who goes onto his show. And it is just the most angry, vindictive edge cover. It's like, and it is like, look, here's a ball. Now it's gone. Now it's a dove. Okay. Look, here's 2 strings. Now it's 1. Okay. And
somehow Palpatine is returned. Okay.
That was basically the moral back of the movie. It's like, this is the people making Star Wars having their angry magician moment of, look, there's Lando. Okay. Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter. Okay.
Yeah, it's, you described this as a movie that hates that it exists, and I think I agree with you.
Which is a little ironic from Abrams, considering he's part of why it turned out the way it did.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'll say is I think part of the problem with this series is that they had an idea, but they didn't process that idea completely before they made Force Awakens.
Oh,
because there's 2 very specific clues as to who Rey is in Force Awakens, to the point that I hoped for 6 years that she would be Palpatine's daughter. So I was very happy, or granddaughter. I was very happy when they did that in this movie, because I feel that was set up in Force Awakens and nothing else was. That being said, when they made Last Jedi, I don't feel like he gave that information to Rian Johnson.
He did not.
You know what I mean? It's like, let's see what you
Yeah.
do, but we're gonna make her be Palpatines anyway. You know what I
Well,
mean?
so originally, J.J. Abrams was not even supposed to direct this. It was supposed to go to Colin Trevorrow, but after the
Have you
bombing
read
of
that screenplay?
the bombing of the Book of Henry got this taken away from him.
Yeah, that screenplay's terrible though. It's online.
Yeah, it's but it is true that Rian Johnson, to give and I think Rian Johnson is very good when he's making mystery movies and sci-fi stuff like Looper. I think
Looper's great. Yeah.
I think he should stay away from Star Wars. I do not think Rian Johnson is well suited for Star Wars, but to Rian Johnson's credit, he said, I asked J.J. Abrams, like, hey, what do you have planned for this? Because I want to know. And J.J. Abrams just refused to tell him anything. So again,
And that's the problem. Yeah.
exactly. It's like if we want anyone, if we need a villain in this trilogy, it's not Rian Johnson. It is ultimately J.J. Abrams. It's his.
I mean, at the very, it's like, or if you want to put somewhere, it's like, also maybe acknowledge Kathleen Kennedy could have sat everyone down and went, okay, everybody, cards on the table now. We're getting this all in order.
Well, they should have had a screenplay for Force Awakens, and they should have had treatments locked in a safe for the other two, and then the people could have made them based on those treatments.
Well,
also, I'm sorry, this is also Rise of Skywalker's the point where it's like a little fan feedback is good, but you also don't let them know they have that power.
Yeah, I think the sidelining of Kelly Marie Tran is particularly leaves a bad taste in my mouth because, again, this was a woman who was bullied off of social media because she had a part in a movie. And the response, rather than Star Wars kind of going like, whatever, we're Disney, we are just going to do what we want, is just going, nope, write her out. I mean, maybe they thought they were doing it for her protection, but that just, it doesn't sit right with me. Finn's character, again, I think is the biggest wasted potential of the series, because I think this idea of a man going from a child soldier to rogue stormtrooper to a hero is such a great arc, and both Johnson and Abrams in this movie completely waste him. And John Boyega has gone on record in multiple interviews saying like, no, it's awful. And it's never been said, but there has been speculation that one of the reasons his role was downplayed was because of the global market, and unfortunately anti-blackness is a global thing.
I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is because Oscar Isaac was more charismatic, and
I
they didn't kill him in Force Awakens.
Charismatic.
Well, I mean, the problem is also they didn't know what to do with Oscar Isaac to the point
Oscar
where
Isaac wasn't supposed to make it past one movie,
Right.
though.
Right, he wasn't supposed to survive the first one.
and he's similarly said like you can't get me back for these, and to the point where apparently when he signed up to be Moon Knight, it was so we're clear, you only have me for the TV series. Anything after that we'll negotiate when we get there.
Yeah.
It's really one where it's like, look, I get it. The original Star Wars was written on the seat of its pants, and it somehow all worked because of editing and collaboration and prayer. But you're Disney, Kathleen Kennedy, you have one of the biggest properties in the world. The fact that there was not a big group meeting with all of the writers and all of the directors, or even an outline that was given to the director saying, this is what the writers have planned. It's a fundamental mismanagement of a major property. Also, just a sad note. So in 2019, we did lose Peter Mayhew as well, the original Chewbacca. I checked, there was not a dedication to him in this movie, and that makes me angry.
They didn't do one for Kenny Baker either.
I know, it's I get it. Carrie Fisher was like a loss, but these actors who are the people behind the suits, they are just as vital to this franchise as the actor whose face we saw. So yeah, not a fan of that. Also, another thing that was a little wasted that I wish we could have seen more of, Naomi Ackie. I really thought she has good screen presence. I think the idea of there being a larger tribe of runaway rogue former stormtroopers is a cool idea. Man, it would have been cool if this was introduced in maybe The Last Jedi and we could have developed it a bit more. I don't know. Shrug. Yeah. But it kind of ends with all right, I guess. I think I don't hate it as much as some other fans do, but there's definitely some things there where it's like, geez. I did love seeing Billy D. Williams again, though. absolute highlight. And for the man's age, he still looked like he was having a great time. And it was a nice counterbalance to Carrie Fisher's reanimated Ghost, which I know that Disney got,
Most of it,
yeah,
most of it's actual real footage though,
but it's
because the
weird.
family was against.
I
I
know
thought the family was against it. Yeah.
they were against the AI, like doing an AI for her. They were just reused footage, but the way the footage is, it's so choppy, and it seems it's so choppy and disjointed. I would have just preferred they maybe were like Leia went out fighting between this movie and the next movie, and it could be the Resistance figuring out how do we go forward without our leader.
I really thought the beginning was going to be a spaceship blowing up with her on it. I thought they were going to start off the movie that way.
I wouldn't want to do that. No, I wouldn't want her just blowing up on a spaceship. I would want her doing a move like Laura Dern did in The Last
Like,
Jedi.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, if they hadn't used that, that would have been perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we have learned. So actually, between this, we have had.
I was going to say, we got to talk about, we can't just pass over this. This is what Star Wars has become.
Now.
Yes.
I'm going to say full disclosure. I have not watched a single of these series.
And I've seen every episode.
It's too much. I am at the point
it's
where
not.
I feel like there's too much Star Wars, and I need to wait a bit before I watch these things. I'm a little Star Wars out now. I do want to. I at the very least want to watch Andor and the Mandalorian, but it is just one where I'm like, oh god, there's so much. Whatever
No,
happened?
the best.
Star Wars
Obi-Wan
is
Kenobi is
amazing.
incredible. It's incredibly directed by a woman. I think she directed all 8 episodes.
Okay, I mean, I do
Um,
love Ewan, so. I'll
No,
come
you'll
back.
love Obi-Wan Kenobi. I just want to say real quick to anyone who's had some issues with the prequels that Dave Filoni is a person who's now become kind of second in command of the Star Wars saga right now, behind Jon Favreau. And he made the cartoon series The Clone Wars. And he's somebody who saw the prequels and only saw the good in it. He didn't see any of the bad in it. And his Clone Wars series, if you watch it, elevates those movies in a way that they're now watchable. He does things in that series that makes trade disagreements and a talking pink frog make sense to be together. It's incredible.
This is why I kind of laughed when there were people going like, Filoni's got to write out the sequels. Like, did you guys not watch what he does? That's not what Filoni does. He doesn't cut, he fills it.
No, and he's trying to elevate those right now in the series. We'll see what he does. He has written a backdoor though for a multiverse, so Star Wars can go that route as everybody else has apparently.
No.
But I would highly suggest all these TV shows. They're all great and they're all way better than the prequel or sequel trilogies.
I mean, I will eventually watch them. I just kind of is at the point where, again, it's like, I'm Star Wars out. I think I need a 5-year break because, as I said earlier, back in my day, Star Wars was every 3 years and that was it. And I do wonder if we're kind of getting to the point of oversaturation, but there are people still watching the stuff.
I think there's a difference between good and bad. Solo was bad saturation. That was Last Jedi, Solo, and Rise of Skywalker back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
If I got 3 of those in the TV series, I probably would stop watching.
Right. Well, so in April, just last month, they announced there's going to be a new Star Wars series, and Daisy Ridley is going to come back. But I was wondering, do we think the future of Star Wars may not be on the big screen? It may be better off as a television series or as a limited series.
I would argue that what you said about saturation, if you're going to do a movie, do one every 5 years or so. Don't do a movie every season like the Marvel movies.
And
Yeah.
Make the movie you have to go to the theater to see this.
Yes, don't give them homework. Like, let the movie be able to stand on its own.
Yeah. Like
Also,
one of the ideas is to do one that takes place at the beginning of the Jedi. That would be perfect. It'd be epic.
Also, Liz, to your point about Boyega, I think the television aspect does free them up a little more because they're no longer beholden to. I think the nicest way to put it would be the prejudices of a worldwide market.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what you like, Liz, you will love Andor. I'm not positive how much you're going to love the rest. You're going to absolutely love Andor.
Andor was actually the one that I'm really like, okay, maybe I'll give this a shot. But we're in content overload now. We just finished Perry Mason and Succession is still on. So speaking of horrible families.
Oh God.
And I'm slowly binging my way through the stuff for August, which I forgot to mention at the time. Fun fact: David Lynch wasn't the running to direct Return of the Jedi while they were leading up to this.
And that's how
Oh,
we
yeah,
got
that's right.
Dune.
Yep, that was his second shot, and he doesn't like to talk about that one that much.
Yeah.
Can't imagine why.
So before, Todd, I know you had a point to make about time, but before we get to that, I'm going to preface this with a clip from one of my favorite podcasts, 80s All Over. So this was the May of 1983 episode where they talked about the Return of the Jedi. And Drew, who was about 13 or so when it came out, had this to say. Oh, come back.
I think Return of the Jedi is a perfect example of what a Star Wars movie is for the most part. Empire is the anomaly, it's the outlier. We're not going to get Empire every time. Jedi's pretty much what we're going to get. I think if that's the bar that you said, that Star Wars movies are fine, they're good, they have their ups and downs and things they do well and things they don't, then you don't get so invested that your life becomes renaming your Twitter account to "I hope Ryan Johnson's penis falls off."
Oh, don't even get me started on that. Because even back in the day when we had our minor disappointments about these movies, we were smart enough. If we had Twitter, we wouldn't go attacking the director. We'd be like, well,
I don't know. I think we just have a different age now. And I think that there would have been just as many people who were losing their shit over choices made in Empire and choices made in Jedi. What? Now they're brother and sister? What? Wait, Yoda dies and he doesn't do anything? He doesn't fight anybody? What? You would have heard the same kinds of insane. The Emperor comes out of nowhere. Who is he? He wasn't even in the first film. Now he's the main bad guy. Vader's basically a dog on a leash. What is this?
who's Lobot?
I can imagine the exact same nonsense. And I would imagine that, like with Jedi, like with the prequels, like with any Star Wars movie, time will eventually bring it to a place where it's generally well liked and there's going to be things we have problems with. That's Star Wars in general, man. And I think Jedi should have been the moment we realized it and stopped putting the weight of every hope and dream on one film franchise.
Words of wisdom from Drew.
Brilliant.
Really. So, Todd, you had a point you wanted to make about the prequels, the sequels, and everything going forward.
I mean, that kind of pretty well sums it up because this is one where it kind of, especially the more I look back at it in the wake of the prequels, I'm looking at it's, I will be the first to admit, yeah, I kind of came into this game late, but I was there to see, like, listening to them talk about that, I did not realize there was as many critiques about Return of the Jedi. I came into the time where it was just people were upset about the Ewoks. And then as the prequels kind of made their way, the Ewoks kind of got pushed to the side. Then we saw people start to realize, okay, and then I saw people arguing like, no, the prequels aren't that bad. And some of that is Filoni kind of filling in the gaps. Some of that is also just the people who grew up with them are now older and have more of a spot at the table. It's part of why I don't get that mad about a lot of the stuff that happened in sequels, because I'm like, in another 10 years or so, the kids who grew up with those, they're going to have their shot, that they're going to be old enough to have their say, and we'll go look and go, they're not perfect, but they're trying.
Yeah.
Can I say
And
one
I mean,
final thing?
Sure.
We all live
I don't-
long
oh,
enough to
go ahead,
watch
Todd,
the
sorry.
holiday special go from one of television's biggest debacles to a Camp Curio.
I saw an interview with Quentin Tarantino recently, and he was talking about Star Trek: The Motion Picture and how he enjoys it now because he enjoys it for what it is, not for what it isn't.
Exactly.
And I thought that was a profound way to enjoy what you enjoy and not letting it get to you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, as I've kind of said, like, I love Star Wars. It's still like, I still love the original trilogy. I do think we need to start seeing the original trilogy as this was lightning in a bottle. I don't think we're ever going to really recapture whatever that was. But I think Drew's point of like, look, Star Wars has always been a little uneven. Some of the films are just a little more uneven than others. And a film like Empire it's the fluke. It's the anomaly. I think it's a good way to look at this, but it is just one where it's like, guys, at the end of the day, this is a movie about space wizards and laser swords. So
Yeah.
It's just a show. You should really just relax, if I can borrow from another franchise. Has Mystery Science Theater 3000 riffed on the holiday special?
No, but
think
Riff
that-
Tracks did.
Yes,
Oh,
I think
okay.
Rift Tracks did, but I don't know about the Satellite of Love proper.
Riff Tracks gets away with more, I think.
Yeah, they are. The entire Rift Tracks formula kind of allows them to sidestep copyright.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, somebody asked, how many of the cast members were coked out? I believe this is in reference to my comment about people being blitzed on
Yep.
Well, there's that scene when they get to Cloud City.
Well, no, I believe that was my discussion on the
holiday special.
the holiday special.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I don't want to make too much light because Carrie Fisher did go through addiction issues.
Yeah.
So I think at the very least she might have but she was also open about it. So I think she even said, "Oh yeah, I was high." Mark Hamill might have taken a few hits.
That was before his accident, right? His
Yeah,
accident was
Yeah.
between the holiday special. Yeah.
yeah.
I think Harrison Ford was probably just dipping into some of the weed he was selling.
Again, Harrison Ford.
He's the anomaly. Harrison
Grumbly
Ford's the
old man, I love
anomaly.
him. Oh wow, somebody in the chat said they saw Star Wars in a theater in the first run. I think that's
Dang.
amazing though, because I'd love to. There are some films I'd love to just go back in time and see with a group, like seeing Psycho in 1960.
And the theaters back then were theaters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, one cinema, one screen.
Mhm. But it's Star Wars too. Like actually more than the original Star Wars, I'd love to go to a screening of The Empire Strikes Back with people who had no idea what that revelation was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason it's such an iconic moment, even though it's misquoted a lot. Luke, I am your father is not the line.
Right.
One of my favorite behind the scenes stories in that is I don't remember which special it was, like they're interviewing James Earl Jones talking about the first time he read that line in the script. And he kind of had a pause when he's like, he's lying. Vader's lying. This is not real.
Oh,
That was actually a thought. My brother was that like if you read Starlog and things like that, trying to predict what happens in Jedi, one of the things was he telling the truth?
yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm interested to see where this series goes. I will eventually watch The Mandalorian and Andor. I think I just basically after The Rise of the Skywalker, I think I was just like, I'm taking 5 years off. I'm taking 5 years off.
Liz, and I
I'll
think
come back.
Pedro who's joined us, I think Pedro will agree that once you watch the shows, you will understand that this is the way.
Okay. Oh no. Hey, I do have a little Grogu here. It was gifted
There you
to me
go.
by a patron. I do love Baby Yoda. I have not watched an episode of The Mandalorian. And again, it's cool if you like it. This isn't me going like grumbling about there being too much Star Wars. It's just like there's too much for me right now. But it is interesting how it went from being like this very special, rare thing when I was a kid to it just being everywhere now. But same time, I'm like, I think that's fun. And there's a whole, new generation that's going to discover this. And
If there's 40 Godzilla movies, 5 of them can suck.
yeah. And I just
We
like
don't
the
talk
idea
about
of
Godzilla's revenge.
there will be, the kids are going to discover the original trilogy too. Although if I hear any children saying the original trilogy is hokey, we're going to have some words. I've heard people say that and I'm like, come on, it's made in the 70s. Cut it some slack. And by the way, George Lucas, please, for the love of goodness, release the original cuts. Just give us the option to watch something other.
Well,
than
it's not
whatever
him.
you're
It's Disney, isn't it? And I'm
No, it's always been
surprised.
Lucas. It's been Lucas.
Here's the thing. Disney theoretically
Eh.
could do it for Empire and Jedi. Lucas specifically carved out the rights on the first one.
Well, we'll get him at a certain point. I don't want to get morbid, but we'll have him at a certain point.
Just like with the Day the Clown Cried.
Yeah, which we got to take that trip.
Oh,
I
hell
want to
yeah.
see that.
Alrighty, well, with that, I am going to bid everyone good night. Happy May the 4th. And by the way, Return of the Jedi, they are doing some showings in theaters. So if you want,
Oh, wow.
go see the 40th anniversary screenings.
Excellent.
All right, have a good night,
Actually,
everybody.
Also,
Everybody.
Concord Red River Theater is showing A New Hope this Thursday. So
Oh,
if you're
that's right,
free,
7 p.m. If anybody wants to go, the
Cool.
Red River Theater in Concord, New Hampshire, you can go see A New Hope on the big screen.
if you're watching this now, if you're watching this like a week from now, sorry guys.
Alrighty, have a good night, everyone.
Bye.